we'll get started with the webinar. So you go ahead with the introductions and welcome, Nancy.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone, and happy October. I'm Nancy Simpson, Secretary of the Board at Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome panel members and attendees to this Q&A discussion. Thank you to Gateway's Vice President, Jay McFarlane, and our admin lead, Sarah Versteeg, for the tech support they provided to help ensure that our 2020 speaker series could continue virtually. I hope you've all had a chance to view the documentary Screenagers and found it to be informative and enlightening. Helping kids and teens to navigate the digital age they live in and manage a healthy amount of screen time were clear goals in creating the documentary. Thanks for joining us now to continue that conversation. It's my pleasure to introduce the 4 panel members for this session. Joining us from Stratford, Lorena Mckenna, singer, songwriter, director of the Falstaff Family Centre, and founder of the Stolen Child Project, an initiative examining the many challenges facing youth and families in the 21st century. Lorena introduced me to Screenagers during a public viewing held at her centre last fall. Bonnie Baynham represents Huron Perth Public Health as well as our Gateway Board. Excited to be part of this panel is Ali Wilson at the Tanner Steffler Foundation, where she is a youth engagement coordinator and also involved in their new Youth Advisory Council. So we're looking forward to hearing about those, Ali. Our moderator this evening is Tanya MacIntyre. Tanya is an addictions recovery facilitator. So a big thank you to Lorena, Bonnie, Ali, and Tanya for participating in this panel discussion. Each of your organizations has a really important role in supporting families in our communities, and Gateway is so pleased to be collaborating with you on this initiative. So I'll turn it over to Tanya now for opening comments from each panel member.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I am so honored to be here, part of this very important process. I so enjoyed the documentaries. I'm very much looking forward to hearing all the feedback because I have lots of notes that I want to share with you all. So I would like, first of all, just to go around our little circle here and, just take 30 seconds or so to tell us a little bit about you and why you're involved. Now, Jay, I do know that you're the Vice President at Gateway and you are kind of the overseer of everything. Do you want to spend a few seconds just to tell everybody about yourself and whether or not you have the challenging parental duties of trying to moderate your screen time with kids? Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd go so far as to call myself the everything, but I helped out a lot with Gateway with a lot of the tech stuff, and happy to help with this tonight. I'm a father of 3, and screen time is that's a big bargaining chip in our house. It's how we get things done. It's something that's we treat it sort of like a currency. It's something that can be earned and taken away. And some of the strategies I saw in the Screenagers, I think I'll definitely be implementing some of those as the kids grow and continue to be using screens in their daily lives. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jay. And Bonnie, we had a few minutes to chat before we began at 7, and you and I both said that we didn't have the courage to be parents because it's the most important job in the world. So Bonnie, your experience, just spend a minute or so to tell us a little bit about why you got involved with the screening of Screenagers.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. And yes, I'm Bonnie Baynham, and I'm a proud board member of Gateway, as Nancy mentioned. And I also work with here in Perth Public Health. So as you can imagine, I have a lot of interest in the well-being of our communities. I'm actually a community developer. So I don't come to our panel here with being an expert at all around screen time, but I was fortunate enough to be part of a really exciting initiative from 2015 to 2018 called Healthy Kids Community Challenge. And Healthy Kids focused on the health of families. So we, when I say we, I mean partners and residents around Huron County participated in over 500 different projects and initiatives, which was just incredible. But one of the themes from Healthy Kids was actually called Power Off and Play. So this is where you can imagine what that's all about, screen time. So I certainly have a very special interest in this topic. So I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, and hopefully I can provide some resources and ideas for parents and community members to access more information, accurate information.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bonnie.
Thank
I
you.
actually participated in that Healthy Kids project as well, Power Off and Play. And yeah, that was an amazing community initiative that is still, we're still feeling the ripple effects around Waterloo region. So that's great.
Nice.
Lorena McKennitt, so good to see you again, Lorena. I was the news director in Stratford when I last interviewed you. So good to see you again, Lorena. And as Nancy said, you introduced Nancy to Screenagers at a screening at Falstaff. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your involvement? And thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I must state at the outset, I mean, folks here know what I do professionally, but I've taken a keen interest in child development and the subject, particularly of children and technology. About 12 years ago, I adopted a little boy from Kazakhstan. So I'm an older single mom with, and this has been a very, very interesting path, studying not only what is education, but also what role technology has in children's lives. And becoming more acquainted with some of the strengths and benefits, but also some of the perils. And it's been a fascinating walk these number of years, particularly since my son was about to enter into school, that I picked up and read almost everything I could on the subject and got in touch with some of the experts and have struck some connections there. So my involvement is really as much anecdotal and being a connection to the experts rather than being one. And if anyone can benefit from my own path, I'm delighted to share that with them.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lorena. Ali, hello. Youth Support Specialist with the Tanner Foundation. So glad you could join us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm honored to be here on behalf of TSF and join this meaningful conversation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight. Yeah, so I was recently hired by the Tanner Steffler Foundation, which is a mental health and addiction nonprofit, and I'm the youth engagement coordinator. So in this role, I just supported TSF in launching their youth advisory council, which is all done virtually through Zoom, and it's been a really great start. In our most recent meeting, actually, when I was talking about this event and the documentary, we got on the topic, of course, and everyone had some really great insight, all of the youth, and we kind of went around and shared like our most valuable app on our phone or device, and it was so cool that everyone had an app that's related to mental health and wellness, and that we all got to learn about these different helpful tools. So that was really neat. But I am excited to be a part of this conversation too, because I've been running the social media accounts and engaging with youth that way, especially during the COVID era. So I've been super intentional with creating positive spaces online and using like an anti-oppressive and trauma-informed lens and starting some conversations that way. So yeah, it's been good.
Excellent. That's fantastic, Ali. And I think it's so important for the peer support component to be available now more than ever. You know, I was a long time in mainstream media, long enough to know that there's an agenda of mainstream media. You know, it's called programming for a reason. We are programmed to be fearful, and we're seeing a very good example of that right now. But I've lived long enough to see what I've come to know as the FUD factor, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and mainstream media perpetuates it. That's the agenda. And when we are paralyzed by this FUD factor, what are we more likely to do? We're more likely to go out and buy something or take something to feel better. And I cannot even imagine what you parents are facing bringing up children in this digital era. Because now I follow Brené Brown. She's an American researcher at one of the universities, and she's a best-selling author now. And she's done extensive research to show that North Americans, at least, are now the most stressed, depressed, overweight, over-medicated population in history. And I think the reason for this is now we are bombarded with messages, marketing messages that keep telling us we're never good enough until we go out and buy something or take something to feel better. In my field of addiction recovery, you know, the numbers are growing. I think the true pandemic is really addiction. And we're seeing, you know, more and more of that. I mean, how many of us know, don't know anyone who is suffering from some form of anxiety or depression? You know, stress has just become just a mainstream term now. Everybody is experiencing stress. And I think children even more so now. The latest statistics I read just about 6 months ago, that we are now exposed to 3,000 advertising messages a day. Now that's only if we're spending a third of our lives in front of a screen, you know, just the general 8-hour workday. That's not to mention the extra screen time, right, that we're talking about in the downtime. And trying to regulate that as a parent, it just, I mean, it's just a never-ending challenge. And, you know, as Jay said, it becomes a currency, I think, with children. So trying to balance that, trying to find a healthy balance, which is what I'm all about in addiction recovery circles, is, you know, how do we find a balance in our life to feed our soul and our health and well-being? So therein lies the challenge. I just loved those documentaries, and I was kind of relieved to know that even though I haven't had children of my own, I'm surrounded by lots of nephews and nieces who are, you know, that digital age, like Allie's age. You grew up with, you know, having a cell phone and an iPad and a computer. I didn't have my first computer until I was in my 30s. So this is a whole new world for me, and I'm learning something every day. But what kind of jumped out at me right away was, we worry about what others think of us. That was one of the first things I heard one of the kids say on the documentary. We worry about what others think of us. And I can remember being in high school just like it was yesterday. I remember being 15, grade 10, and I hadn't done a slick of work all year because I was, you know, the product of a single parent family. It was my father, though, doing the single parenting at that time. And I remember it was 1975, give you an idea of how old I am, 15 in grade 10, thought I knew everything there was to know in the world. What can these teachers teach me? I know everything I need to know, thank you very much. And I knew I was going to fail anyway, so I just did not show up to write the final exams, and of course I had to repeat grade 10. And what I did do, though, at least, was I went back because I wasn't academically inclined and felt stupid, right? I mean, you got all that stuff going on as a teenager. I remember it like it was yesterday. And just thinking, I'll at least learn how to type. At least that's something I can wrap my head around, that I could maybe get a job with, because there's no way I could see myself going on to university. And don't forget, I grew up on the east coast of Canada, very blue collar, Cape Breton, Glace Bay, coal mining town. And the biology teacher in grade 12 said, I guess all you girls who haven't found yourselves a husband yet will be going on to university. And the sad thing was that it was true. Most of my girlfriends who hadn't already been engaged out of high school were going on to take an arts degree and find a husband. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, has a lot changed since then? I like to think we've evolved a little bit, but I'm not sure, Allie, maybe you can pipe in on that to let us talk about your generation experience and the pressures that you feel. Do you still worry about what others think of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like one of the hardest parts for my generation and some of them below is that, you know, stuff with bullying and cyberbullying and high school drama, it never stops. So even when you go home, it's still, and the, you know, the conversation can continue all night. And even like managing and navigating relationships in high school, like there really isn't boundaries, and it's tough. So, and yeah, not being good enough, especially I see on Instagram and Snapchat with filters and how much that has really impacted us in Photoshop. And so it's getting worse in my personal experience and opinion, yeah.
And the other common theme that seemed to come up a lot in the documentary was anxiety, fear. And, you know, like I said, those 3,000 advertising messages a day that we see, and, you know, it may not, if you're thinking, oh, 3,000, there's no way we're exposed to 3,000 advertising messages a day. But even if it's through osmosis, even if you're just even listening to the radio, you know, passively in the car. I was even standing at an elevator the other day, and there was a big screen above the elevator blaring marketing manipulation messages at me. So it's pretty hard to even get away get away from. I always encourage everyone I meet, you know, I've got a couple of decades of mainstream media experience, and I say, you know, what you could do is take the diet that really works, a media fast. Don't watch, read, or listen to news and feel how much your life improves. And when I say that to people, they say, oh, sure, Tanya, good for you, great. Like, just stick your head in the sand and pretend that life is not going on around you. And that's not at all what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that we be the gatekeeper of our mind, and we be selective about the messages that we're exposing ourselves to. And just then once you become aware of how much you're being sold, then you can think, no, I'm just going to put up the barricade here. Nothing that I don't want in my mind is going to get into my mind. And I don't know if that's too oversimplified a message, or
you know, trying to say, my journey actually began reading a wonderful book called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. And he is an investigative journalist, and he found that at a certain point, he couldn't focus on anything for any length of time. And he had a suspicion that it had to do with his extensive use of technology. And he then researched the research that was coming out on this, and he showed, this was 10 years ago, a lot of research showing that the misuse, premature use, and overuse of the technology is literally changing the physiology of the human brain. And I think this is probably, when one studies us as a species and what we're built for, I think this technology, if it's misused or it's used prematurely, it takes us off in some extreme directions that we're simply not built for. Another person that I encountered by the name of, he's an anthropologist from England called Robin Dunbar. And he has a wonderful TED talk called Why Facebook Can't Buy You Friends. And he has studied primates and discovered that the neocortex of the primate brain dictates what size of community you can naturally handle. And that the human species, it might be 40 for a pack of dogs and 100 for a herd of elephants. But for the human species, that number sits about 150. So what the technology is doing, it's pulling us artificially into a realm that we simply cannot handle. And I think that a lot of the symptoms and things that we're, and pathologies, you might say, that we're experiencing as a result of that. People like Dr. Leonard Sachs takes this even further in his books, The Boys Adrift and Girls on the Edge. And there's also a wonderful documentary from CNN, Anderson Cooper. It's from some years ago. Not that I go to CNN for a lot of my documentaries, but this is quite good, this one. And it's called Being 13. And it really pulls back the covers on what that experience is like. But essentially, Dr. Sachs suggests that there's two trajectories for youth starting about teenage years. The girls use the social media to be social, and they text and they will bully and there'll be suicide. There's that kind of trajectory. The boys don't go that trajectory. They are more prone to go for a more gaming addiction or porn addiction. The wonderful book called Glow Kids by Nicholas Kadaris talks about the gaming addiction. Another fantastic book called Man Interrupted gets into gaming addiction as well as addiction to pornography. And that the combination of this is contributing to the academic plummeting of young boys and men's performance at school and at university. So anyway, I think there's some of this territory to appreciate before one can really dismantle or come up with strategies at home, is to really understand who we are as a species, what we're built for and what we're not built for. Absolutely,
Loreena. And, you make a really good point with young men being addicted to video gaming and pornography. It's not unusual for me to talk to young men in their 20s on our addiction recovery meetings. And they will say, their addiction to porn started in prepubescent years. As young as 10 years old, they were exposed to pornography. I can't even imagine what that must be like. At least, we had to go looking for it when we were, 13. But now just a press of a button on a phone and you are exposed to some pretty graphic images. So I can't even imagine what parents are we getting any questions in our little, so we can hear from the parents out there? Because, well, Loreena, how old is your son now?
He's 13.
13. So you must be facing all the challenges we're talking about here and that have been outlined in the documentary.
Yes, well, yes, and not many, because I took such an aggressive approach at the very beginning. Again, after having read Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, it absolutely scared me to death. So I knew of a particular path of education, the Waldorf school. So my son went to a Waldorf school up until a year and a half ago in London, which is, an hour's drive from Stratford. And since over the past year and a half, I've actually been homeschooling him. One of the reasons of going to the Waldorf schools is that their modality of teaching is pretty analog, straight up to about grade 7 or 8, and only then do they introduce technology for research. And then I know there was one student who graduated and built a computer by his grade 8th year. The central pillar of that pedagogy is that you only introduce things that are, for which their brains are ready. And Dr. Sachs talks about this as well, that the human brain really doesn't mature. The male brain of our species doesn't mature until maybe about 26, and the female brain, 24, 23, younger than that. Mm-hmm. So I in the homeschool modality, in fact, I'm sitting in our classroom, there's blackboards, there's books, there's physical items. He had a lot of, even though his peers did not, were not being taught on technology at school, and therefore one didn't have to deal with that part of it, or going home to do homework on Google Docs or something. Still, his peers did evolve to have some devices. He still does not have his own device. He has access to my tablet or MacBook or whatever it is to do some research, or we might watch something on the road. But beyond that, we're still an analog family.
So you made a conscious decision very early on to do that.
I did. I mean, again, after everything that I was reading, I was thinking I couldn't, in all conscience, put him into the public education system. I'm lucky I can do what I've done. Most people can't do what I've done. But as a result of what I was learning, that was so much why, as the director of the Falstaff Family Centre, I wanted to reach out and support other families.
Okay, I just saw something coming in from Kyla, but let me see if I can question.
It was something about what advice to parents.
Is Jay there? Can he? Because I'm seeing no open questions. Maybe it's in the chat
so,
box.
Yeah, in the chat box, Kyla says, "What advice do you have for parents whose kids' friends are playing games and yours are not, and there is pressure to start?"
Yeah, lots of pressure. I was going to mention that to Loreena. The peer pressure that your son must be getting, like all kids are getting, right? It was in the documentary. The doctor's daughter was expecting an iPhone for her 13th birthday.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a true pressure. And, you know, even Jay had mentioned that the digital exposure privilege becomes a currency in families.
Completely, and you really get to feeling left out if you don't have a piece of technology. I mean, for me, you know, one of the steps is trying to find like families to share what I was learning with families, and seeing if they could buy into some degree. I mean, Luca, my son, does connect with some other families whose children have devices, but those parents know my feelings about, and there's so many, we try to facilitate many analog activities. But it is, for me, it's finding like minds and really cultivating activities that the children, we have to do board games, we go on hikes, you know, but it's hard to insert that. I would imagine it's very, very hard to insert that if the culture of the family and the, you know, is established with the technology. It's a slow carving back.
Yeah,
I really liked how in the documentary, the doctor, it showed her conversations with her daughter, and you know, this inclusion of the whole family and having the conversations, and you know, really engaging youth in the dialogue, right, and presenting opportunities to share reasons why parents are so concerned. I really loved that piece of it. It really stuck with me. You know, because we're really trying to strike some balance, right? Because we know that in 2020, technology is here, and it's here to stay. And it's really looking at, you know, how can we find some balance with ourselves, you know, and our role as role models, and also in having conversations and being realistic with our kids about technology.
yeah.
And yes, I think that's a really important piece, is how do you have the conversation? So, you know, educating ourselves as the adults around the issues. And I guess this is where I get to throw in, you could look for, following up on that question, I'm going to be the resource queen maybe. Just let me see if I can find it here. There's a great website called Media Smarts, and I would highly, highly recommend it. It will provide lots of answers to some of those questions. There's also another site called Caring for Kids. We're going to put all of these resources that I'm sharing with you up on the Gateway site. So, or I guess I could pop them in the chat also for you. Anyway, sorry, there we go. I'll do that.
I might just also follow up and say that, you know, I think one of the values of this Screenagers film, and why Dr. Delaney produced it, was that it would be a tool for parents to share with their children as a talking point, because it's very, you know, if the students, or not the students, if the children can hear, or the youth can hear from some other experts. I mean, Sherry Tukel is, I think, in this this documentary of hers, if they can hear other people explaining their concerns, and that it's not just parents who are having to hold that. So I see Deb, somebody was just popped in to say.
Yes, so Deb De Jong says, I watched the documentary with my 13-year-old daughter. The scene with the mice losing neurons permanently when exposed to lights and distractions was a tipping point for her. And she is off technology for a few days. That's awesome to hear, Deb. That's excellent. And Ali, thoughts on what might make the change for teens to maintain neural pathways and healthy life choices? That is a great question.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I definitely think there is a time and a place for social media. So navigating that balance and really being aware, like maybe, because there is an app on iPhone specifically that'll show you like how much time you really are spending on your phone and on each app specifically. So kind of being reflexive on that, and then realizing, okay, this is how much time I'm spending. And then either together or giving them some time on their own, going through some self-care practices that aren't involved with technology at all. So even in the documentary, it showed the son who went back to his love for piano. So activities like that, or writing, or painting, or going for hikes. So having a balance, because like, I do see the value in social media and technology, and being able to access, especially during COVID and quarantine, our communities that way, especially if a youth is going through something that they do need a youth peer support to be there for. So, you know, for example, if a queer youth needs a sense of community and can only, especially in rural Ontario, can really only access that through that technology. So setting those boundaries, and if you're able to be honest and your child is able to say, like, in the evening from 6 to 8:30, or, you know, 6 to 7:30, I'm going to be on my phone in my room, but then I'd love to come back to a common area to play a game all together, or something like that. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. A couple of notes that I took when watching the documentary. When kids learn to verbalize how to express their emotions and feelings, they can feel empowered and hopeful and limitless. And not only kids learning to do that, I think as adults, we need to learn to do that. I mean, that comes up in my recovery meetings all the time. We talk about our emotional sobriety. It's one thing to have physical sobriety, but what about the emotional sobriety? You know, that's when the real journey begins. So I think engaging with kids is important, but like the parents are saying, how do you start those conversations, Ali?
Well, I think a huge part of it, personally and professionally, is not putting the blame on children and teenagers, because we really are, like, up against billion-dollar Silicon Valley who have perfected the algorithm and psychology of keeping us addicted to these apps, and the next video that's going to play is something we're going to be engaging with and interested in. So going into it, not putting the blame on us and our children, because it's really not our fault. So being really kind and patient, and just being having that compassion to be and explain that to them. So yeah, educating yourself, and like Bonnie said earlier, mentioned in the documentary, like explaining why, because and so having that information to explain your concern, and not just to say, you know, put your phone away, you're not connecting with us, but having a deeper conversation. So maybe preparing yourself before you go into it, and then having that compassion and patience, because it's something as youth we don't, it's not public knowledge that they've really you know, perfected the psychology to keep us engaged with it. So I hope, is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think you're right. The awareness of the manipulation that's going on,
Yeah.
right? I think, you know, kids want to hear that. It's like Deb just said, like her daughter was like, really? Mice lose their neurons permanently when they're exposed to distractions and lights? And like, I'm looking at that stuff for hours at a time, right? What's it doing to my brain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
Loreena?
Well, I think this pulling back the curtains on Silicon Valley is another very valuable step. When you see how deliberately and consciously they have stitched in the addiction part, it's quite shocking. And I know there are governments around the world that are now working at pace to trim the sales of a lot of these companies. But youth who are old enough to understand these kind of concepts, I think they deserve, it's like having good health, a good sexual health. You want to be able to explain the whole picture, where the pleasures are, but where the dangers are, and who's really behind it. What is the business model? Because we know originally on websites it was eyeballs, but now it's data. And the purpose of their addiction, there was someone who from Facebook just last week, I was reading on the New York Times, was saying that they knew they were designing this into Facebook. And so if their business model, it's like the tobacco companies, and he said it, we really took a page on the tobacco companies. So when you to the youth, and in actual fact, they're being manipulated, they're being used and damaged, actually harmed, if they're not using it wisely. And there are lots of great, good, wise use, but I think they really deserve to have it explained to them what the business model is, where the dangers lie, and not to fall for all of this. Be the person in control. Don't give your control over to the companies.
And I think it's really important that as adults, we're the role models as well, right? I heard a lot of kids in the documentary saying, well, you know, mama's telling me to regulate my screen time, and yet look at her over there.
There's my phone, the flip phone.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, I think we have to give you, I mean, depending on the age of the young person, you know, we have, our youth are very, like, I say this all the time, like youth are very knowledgeable and know what's going on, but they may not know that background piece, as Ali and Lorena were referring to. You know, and I think if you, the tobacco industry is a really good example when we look at promoting health to our communities and to our, you know, they were lying to us all along, you know. So some of the successes of the work that's been done around tobacco and smoking has been quite successful. And, you know, maybe this is another example of sharing that information, right? And educating. I think if youth knew, you know, maybe some of, I'll use the word deception, but some of the deception underlying all of this, I think it's important for them to know and understand, so that they then can make informed decisions on what would be good for them.
I mean,
You know, because we've seen that, as I mentioned, with the tobacco industry, like youth were outraged when they started finding out exactly what these companies were doing. Yeah, we need to educate ourselves and then have conversation with young people. We probably learn a few things too if we sit down and have those conversations and do some listening, I think.
Same with Google Docs, you know, that's invaded the education system, and the whole Google. I mean, it's a battle between a number of the companies, but they're really trying to get customers young. I heard a wonderful program on Spark on CBC Radio about a year ago, and this gentleman was a cyber expert, and he was from Victoria, and he was telling the interviewer how he chose not to sign his daughter up on Google Docs at their local school because he knew too much about the data they were going to be starting to collect on her from the time she entered grade 1 till the end of her school days. So, like I say, I mean, whether it's Google, Facebook, or, you know, a number of the other ones, nobody should be under any illusions as to what the business model is and what you'd never get anything for nothing. There is a price within this.
I agree, Lorena. I think awareness is key, and, you know, kids are very intelligent and they want the facts. Like Deb said, you know, her daughter, as soon as she recognized that that's the kind of effect that the screen is having on her brain, she wants to back away. So I think when we empower youth with information, with truth, and, you know, we have to be careful with that word true as well, right? I think one of the better definitions I've heard is truth, a fundamental reality defined by a person's perceived experience. So truth is quite subjective, right? You need to uncover your truth. The Social Dilemma is a documentary on Netflix right now. Definitely worth a watch with your kids, because it talks about that business model that Lorena was just talking about and there is not one person in Silicon Valley that lets their children have any screen time. So that should speak volumes, right?
This is probably one of the most striking things I learned maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, is seeing that it was another piece in the New York Times, and they were saying where a lot of families who were working in Yahoo and Facebook and so on were sending their children to school. They were these Waldorf schools that were very, very non-tech. And then just last year, I read a follow-up piece along the same theme, but they're saying that the digital divide is going now along economic parameters, meaning that the very, very wealthy, the children of the 1% or less than 1% are not being educated on technology, and all the rest of society is. And they're realizing that, you know, because these companies have invaded the education system in a way that has not been balanced or measured, I think there's a real place, in my personal view, is, you know, by grade 8, absolutely, let the children, let the youth learn this technology. Their brains are developed enough to understand the complexity and the risks. But you know, the OECD a few years ago came out with a report saying there was no evidence to show that more technology in the educational setting made for better results. So I think that, you know, in the many battlegrounds on this, in my view, one also needs to be the education system, whether it's right up to the ministry level, saying, look, we need to have another look at the rightful place of technology and try to avoid these incredible, tragic, unintended consequences. It's a very, very slow road, very, very slow road.
Yes, that is truly unfortunate that it is a slow road. And of course, you know, it's just such a giant now, right? It's like, how do you tame the giant? Therein lies another challenge. And the violent video games, I was surprised to learn actually that these actually came from the military to desensitize soldiers who were going into war. And again, just the awareness of that, you know, would that change a young child's mind about playing the video games if they first learned about what is it designed to do? It's designed to desensitize.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, we're creating a generation of young men who are going to have a more difficult time to get the, you know, their emotional maturity under wraps, for sure.
I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, when I think about, you know, and I've been thinking about it a lot because I knew I was going to be on this panel, and I thought, well, I'm not an expert in this area, but there are some things that, you know, just through my experience of my work with public health, just around, you know, paying attention to the content, right? So the time that we know that youth, I believe I heard around 7 hours a day for young people on digital devices, which includes TV too, everybody. I guess we haven't really talked about TV. We're talking about the internet, but you know, it's really about mitigating some of the risks, but grabbing onto some of the great opportunities that come with this access also. But it's like really paying attention to, you know, the content, how much contact or time our young people, and actually all of us are spending engaged in these materials. And then, you know, I guess spending time also discussing with kids and having conversations around, you know, that whole safety piece, you know, and how we all behave online. I know that's kind of takes us off in another direction, but, you know, there's so many layers of screen time, right? Like it's actually a very big topic. And obviously after watching the documentary, I'm thinking, I need to invest a little bit more time in all of this because we know there are some health implications from all of this around sedentary behavior, you know, what we eat, like the increase in the types of food that we all choose when we're sitting in front of the TV. I don't know about all of you, but I certainly ate more than my share of potato chips during COVID. So it's just that, you know, not thinking about, you know, what we're consuming, and, you know, it becomes kind of part of our day. 7 hours a day, that just is astounding to me.
So if we have the dialogue with kids to say, what if we, you know, became aware of all of this manipulation and decide to be the gatekeeper of our mind and treat our mind like a garden, that we're only going to sow good seeds, and we're going to treat all the manipulation of marketing like the weeds that we need to keep out, right? Like, I don't know, Allie, with that kind of language, would kids just roll their eyes at that?
Maybe some. But no, that's a great point. And I think it's just being honest, it's going to be so uncomfortable at first. Like, because we go from, like, as youth, we're never alone with our thoughts because we're listening to music or listening to a podcast or engaging through social media or texting, then watching a show during dinner, or and then, you know, we fall asleep from like being on our phones. So we're never alone with our thoughts, and there are studies that showing it's really impacting like our ability to make decisions and be creative, and it's having huge impact. So to make these changes, and even the simplest changes, is going to be so uncomfortable at first, but as parents and as family and as friends, just we're in this together, and we can plant those seeds and treat our bodies and minds a lot better. So we just got to be patient with ourselves.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's certainly been a message we've all been hearing during the pandemic, right, is being kind. And yeah, I always worry, when we're starting to look at programs and some of those things in the community, that we're not blaming, that we're not putting all this responsibility on parents, or not putting it all on the kids or youth. We really, Ellie, I think you captured it best. Like, it really is like a collective thing that we all need to be doing together, right? And this is a great start, like Gay for Gateway, because having something like Screenagers to sit down and view and learn, and then have an opportunity for us to have conversations is amazing. And that's what I would suggest to our families out there. If it's difficult, watch something like Screenagers, or what's it called, the social dilemma, and then look for opportunities with technology to have those kinds of conversations. Like, get the popcorn, get the gang together and sit down and, watch something together, and then have some conversations. Like, I look at that as being opportunity. There's opportunity for learning and dialogue and communication, to build what the family plan might look like. Like, what do you think about this, kids? Like, you're being manipulated. Like, tell us what you think about it. Let's talk about what our household should do.
And I like the idea of the contract. I think that's an excellent idea. Loreena,
yes, I do.
Doing something like that with your teenager?
I've not had to consider that at this time, but I do understand how it might be a valuable instrument in some families. But I've kind of, thankfully, I think, navigated us to the threshold where I feel I can now let my son have more and more technology. In fact, I have a media literacy course here that we intend to go through that covers everything from plagiarism and copyright to pornography and the whole 9 yards of it. So I think this too is what's needed in the picture, is a kind of media literacy that is for 2020, and understanding how marketing and promotion works, but where the particular dangers are in this.
Mm-hmm. And that we are receptacles, right? We are meant to be consumers and feed the enterprise of capitalism.
And it's also interesting to think, what are the elements that ring each person's bell? I know that many people don't realize there's a huge environmental concern about the overuse of technology and human rights that begins with mining lithium and so on, straight to technology that's not built to be repaired. Now there's entities called the Right to Repair associations in North America and so on. So I think that when lays out to teenagers, or let's say the role that Facebook has played in certain human rights catastrophes like in Myanmar, you realize, and one would argue the last US election, and perhaps being weaponized as we speak, that as youth become more sensitized to, there's a whole range of things to be aware of, and you may very well be a cog in somebody else's wheel, and just be aware of that and manage your use and time accordingly. And perhaps if you're looking for a civics moment, you can help support all those leaders who are trying, those committees around the world that are, and we have them here, that are trying to bring more control in these companies and their influence in our lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think if children did know where their cell phones come from, and that child labor, slavery actually, is being employed in countries to get those precious metals to do the cell phones, then maybe they think twice, excuse me, about needing an upgrade every 6 months and value the one that they have for longer.
I think this conversation has led really nicely into a question we had come in. And that question is, having discussed the deleterious effects on the individual of too much screen time, please comment on what you would suggest ministers of health at federal and provincial levels do to assist families with control of the internet.
I don't know if that's going to be a governmental role. I think that needs to be a parental role.
I think there's a governmental piece happening. I'd like to be able to say that more confidently than I am, but I believe that Charlie Angus is part of this committee in Ottawa. Canada is part of a group of countries called the International Grand Committee that is trying to deal with this. And I know in the UK, they have an excellent white paper on online harms and youth. I would say that this belongs very squarely in their hands, that it's an extremely difficult job if it's going to come from the ground up from parents and teachers and so on now. I think it's so pervasive and so overwhelming, it needs to come from a government level. That's just my view.
And I think there is some commitment, again, from varying levels of government. Certainly, the Ministry of Health has invested some resources. I'm sure not everyone's really focusing right now on all of that, but certainly the federal and the provincial government have invested on many different programs and research around, digital use and digital health. Pardon me. And certainly as that trickles down into communities, right, and then down to families and kids or youth and children. So I think it really needs to be, I always say it needs to start at the top. We do need, we definitely need some commitment from governments, but it's certainly from a health perspective. In my knowledge, there has been some, certainly some investment around all of this, because we know it has impact on many areas of our lives, from, I mentioned before, physical activity, the decline in physical activity, our sedentary behavior, our eating. I could just go on and on. So there has been some investment for sure. I think it's a long road, but certainly there's been some.
I know Dr. Eric Sigman in the UK presented a paper before the European Commission a few years ago, and he goes on at quite length about the medical impact that involves myopia in vision, endocrine disruption, etc. So I think that there is very much a lot of evidence now that this has been around long enough to see, that there are very serious dangers and downsides of the technology if it's not used properly. If it's used properly, I think there's a tremendous value to society.
Yeah, I agree, for sure.
One of the questions that did come out of the documentary that I'd like to share with you are, what are some actions that we could try or have found successful to help avoid screen time overuse in our families? Setting better rules would include kids in the discussion around setting those goals and rules, right? Maybe even entering into some kind of a contract. Using rewards as a motivator, as Jay said, it's become a currency in his household. Rewards work better than punishment for kids. Yeah, definitely. Have frequent short conversations with kids about the favorable and challenging aspects of technology. So sharing things like the social dilemma, that they can open up a dialogue around that. Observe the rules and modify them as you discover what works best. So it's finding that balance. Like you said, Ali, it's an ongoing challenge with kids, especially when peer pressure is involved. Parents are just bombarded with that. Yeah, but they've got, I remember my father used to say, if all your friends jumped off the cliff, would you go with them? Yeah. Yes, I would.
I remember that.
So You know, it's a bombardment. It's nonstop. It just never shuts up. So parents, I feel your pain. I don't know what to say except trying to find that balance and reaching out to peer support specialists like Ali Wilson at the Tanner Foundation. What a fantastic thing that you guys are doing in Perth and Huron counties. Ali, thanks so much to the Tanner Foundation. Excellent stuff. So here we are. Wow, we've only got 4 minutes left. Wow, that went fast. And we covered a lot of information in a very short time. And I noticed that I'm unable to attach files because I've got a document full of resources that I'm unable to attach. So I would say get in touch with the great people at Gateway to get all of those fantastic resources we have, where you can tap into a lot of information and maybe open up those constructive dialogues with your kids. And I loved, somebody said, I love that, analog activities. Lorena, can you start writing a book on analog activities for us, please?
Well, for sure. I would also say the initiative that we started here at Falstaff, the Stolen Child Project, on our website. There's also a list of some of the books and experts that I've mentioned tonight in this call. So in addition to the materials that are available at Gateway, people are most welcome to check the Stolen Child Project website. Yeah.
And of course, Screenagersmovie.com. Let me put that one here. Screenagers movie.
And they also come out with a news. Dr. Delaney comes out with a Tech Tuesdays newsletter.
Tech Talk Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also good and helpful, I think, for parents.
What about mindfulness activities? Do you think that's a little too mature to start getting, because I think mindfulness practices are now entering the schools to get kids to just be in the present, right? Concentrating on their breath and trying to rein in all those feelings of stress and anxiety. Ali, what was your experience in school? Mindfulness or no?
No, I feel like mindfulness wasn't really introduced when I was in elementary or secondary school, but I agree, it definitely is part of the curriculum now, and which is amazing. And I do know that Kids Help Phone has a lot of great resources for making it kid friendly, and that's the great thing about with mindfulness becoming more popular. There's a lot of new activities that will be geared toward the interest of children. I know that Kids Help Phone has a graphic where it watches the balloon inflate and deflate, and if you match your breath to that for young ones, that it's pretty helpful.
Excellent.
I think there are, like, here's what some of the opportunities, I guess, that technology can provide. I mean, I think, Ali, I don't know, you probably, again, know more about this than I do, but there's some pretty amazing apps now that I would encourage parents to look at with their kids. There's an opportunity for, parents and caregivers to spend some time with you to find out exactly what their young people are doing on technology and engage in some of those more positive things online and with technology. Because I think there's some pretty amazing apps now. And I'll make sure that I put some of those resources up on the Gateway site too. So have you tried any of them, Ali? The ones where, that, I don't know, maybe they're meditation and they're helping you to sleep. Have you tried any of them?
Yeah, and the Youth Council brought up Headspace, which I think is the most popular right now. And there is, like, the fact that the youth brought that app up on their own shows that it's useful, and so I would suggest that one, and maybe too even asking like your child's school board which apps they use throughout the day, because I know that a lot of the mental health or ECEs, they know and have all these apps on the school iPads that they could share with you, I'm sure. So they probably have some good ones too.
Excellent. I put a few links over in the chat box as well. keltymentalhealth.ca, that is Dr. Vo. He's a child physician in British Columbia. And you'll find a wealth of resources on his website, including short meditations.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's talking my language, short, like 3 minutes. Yay. Yeah. PalouseMindfulness.com, John Kabat-Zinn, he's kind of the grandfather of mindfulness. You can get his 8-week MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction course, free on PalouseMindfulness.com. Great thing to do as a family activity. Talk about your experiences doing that over 8 weeks. Fantastic resource. And I know Nancy Simpson, Gateway, and Bonnie Baynham, you've got like a wealth of resources at Gateway and Jay. So I encourage everybody on the panel this evening, the parents who are pulling their hair out with this digital era and trying to deal with your kids and get some balance in there, please reach out to Gateway for the countless resources available to you, and the Tanner Foundation, Ali and all of her peer support group network there. Please reach out, and I think that's key, that we need to talk to each other, get support. Absolutely. So please visit screenagersmovie.com, tell your friends and family about it, and maybe get your schools or business groups or social groups to host a screening to open up the dialogues that way as well. I think that would be extraordinary. So let's go around our little circle again, and we'll say, so glad we had this time together. And we will start with Jay. Jay, we didn't get time to talk about your kids and your currency, but thanks so much for being here with us. And would you like to close us out with what was one positive thing that you got from this hour?
Well, and so in addition to all the resources and links that we this whole group has provided here, which I will post on the Gateway website tomorrow, for everyone. I think one of the best things for me tonight was to hear about the different strategies that I could try out and see what sticks. So this has been really informative for me, and I hope lots of other parents and educators that were attendees tonight have learned something too. So
thanks so much, Jay.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
So digital devices in the bedroom at night, or do you have a curfew?
No, we have they're downstairs plugged in, and they can have them during the day, and they really can't have any screens for about an hour or two before bedtime.
Excellent. Well, that's a good one. Thank you,
It's a
Jay.
strategy that's working for us. So
Excellent. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jay. Bonnie, something positive from tonight you'd like to share with us?
Oh, well, just being with all of you for an hour has been fantastic. It's nice to see Ali's face. I think our paths will probably be crossing over the next few months, probably Ali, with some of the work we're doing. I would say just, I really hope that everyone can take away some inspiration, I guess, from Screenagers and from what all of you have shared with us tonight, and I really appreciate it. And Jay, I just wanted to say, you've already got some currency there with those phones and things, and getting your kids to not have technology an hour before bed is something that I know the Canadian Pediatric Society would really support. I don't know what else to say, but I've really been really happy to be here, and I've learned a lot from all of you, so thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Bonnie. Lorena, what a delight to have you here and sharing your insights and wisdom with us. Thank you so much. Was there something that you would like to share with us in closing?
Well, it's just been great to be here as well with everyone, and I'm hoping that some of what we've to say will be helpful to anyone watching. And again, if there's anything I can do to assist folks, contact me through the Falstaff Family Centre. And but it's been a very enlightening evening here, so I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Lorena. We appreciate you participating. Thank you so much. Keep up your extraordinary work. Thank you. Ali, so great to have you on the panel with us this evening. Would you like to share something in closing with us?
Yeah, absolutely. This was so valuable, and there were so many great questions. So thank you again. I think as with the perspective, my eyes were definitely open to the pressure that is on adults and parents, and just wanting to protect your kids, and at the end of the day just caring so much about them. So I think, you know, as much as I'm always advocating for the pressure that's on youth, my eyes were really open to the adult perspective, that so much pressure on you as parents. So yeah, so thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Ali. And Nancy, would you like to share some words in closing?
Yes, thank you everyone for your input, your valued experience, and your expertise. I just wanted to remind everyone about the second documentary. If you enjoyed Screenagers, I know you'll really enjoy their next chapter one. Dr. Delaney was inspired to take screen time to the next level, and next chapter, Uncovering Skills for Stress Resilience, is about strategies to help our kids and teens build those crucial skills so they can navigate those negative emotions like stress, anxiety, and depression in our digital age. And I might add, how relevant is that during our COVID age as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you, everyone. This has been very enlightening, and I've really enjoyed being your moderator for tonight's panel discussion. And I encourage you to go to screenagersmovie.com. That's screenagersmovie.com. I think I did put it in the chat box as well, yes. And remember to join Tech Talk Tuesdays and reach out for local support networks. My name is Tanya MacIntyre. It has been my pleasure. And I look forward to staying connected with you and helping you through the challenges of raising kids in the digital age. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks so much,
Bye-bye.
Tanya.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.